Ben laughed, a short, dismissive sound that sliced through the restaurant's chatter. Clara's good at everything, except maybe letting anyone else have a thought. My fork clattered, the metal ringing against the ceramic plate, drawing eyes. He simply smiled, a private joke. Then, turned to the waitress, ordering another round without looking at me. The bathroom mirror showed Clara's reflection, a neat woman adjusting the strap of her dress. She pulled a few strands of hair back, securing them with a simple clip. Outside the door, the shower had just turned off. Steam still clung to the air when Ben emerged, a towel wrapped low around his waist. Water slicked his hair back, dark against his forehead. He grinned, a familiar expression, and reached for her. "Looks good," he said, his voice rough from the shower, his hands settling on her waist. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Ready for Maves?" "You were complaining about a long week." Clara leaned back into him for a moment, the familiar weight of his arms a comfort. "Just ready for a drink and some loud music." "You taking long with the drying?" She glanced at his damp hair. He squeezed her gently. "Nah. You know me. Quick and efficient." He pulled away, moving towards the dresser to find a shirt. "Who's all going to be there tonight?" Maeve said Sam was coming in from out of town. "Sam, yeah," Clara confirmed, watching him pull a navy polo over his head. The sight of him, half-dressed, moving through their shared space, was a picture of routine. It was a comfortable thing, this life they'd built. Small moments, like morning coffee, or folding laundry together on Sunday afternoons. She thought of the 8 years, the way their lives had woven into one fabric, mostly smooth, occasionally snagged. Jill and Nora, too. Tom. I imagine. Kyle usually makes it after work if he's not too beat. Ben nodded, tucking in his shirt. "All right. Sounds like the usual crowd. I'll grab a bottle from the cellar." He walked past her, his steps firm on the hardwood floor. There was a slight hesitation in his movement, almost imperceptible, as he reached for the wine cabinet near the kitchen. A small shift, perhaps in his posture, or the way his hand lingered on the glass before selecting a heavy Cabernet. He turned back, the bottle in his hand, and his smile seemed a fraction too wide. Too bright. "Ready?" The drive to Maeve's house was short, the late summer air still warm. They listened to the radio, an old rock station Ben favored. Inside Maeve's, the music hit them first, a bass drum thudding through the floorboards. Laughter spilled from the living room, mixing with the smell of something savory baking in the oven. Maeve met them at the door, her face flushed, a glass of sparkling water in her hand. "You made it. Come in, come in," she chirped, pulling Clara into a quick hug. The living room was already full. Sam, looking sharper than usual in a tailored shirt, was talking to Tom near the fireplace. Jill and Nora arrived a few minutes later, their distinct giggles cutting through the din as they shed their light jackets. Kyle eventually showed up, smelling faintly of sawdust from his construction job, a quick nod to everyone as he made his way to the cooler. The group was complete, the familiar faces, a comforting tableau. Clara nursed a glass of Maeve's red wine, the pleasant buzz starting to settle in. She leaned against the cool kitchen counter, watching the conversations eddy and flow around her. Sam detached himself from Tom and moved towards her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Clara," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Good to see you. Maeve tells me you've been doing well, really turning things around at work. She called you ruthless the other day. Actually, said it admiringly, of course. Ruthless in a good way." He gave a small smile. Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Maeve exaggerates," she said, but her voice held a note of quiet pride. "Just trying to make things happen. Sometimes you have to be direct." Jill, having overheard, chimed in. "Oh, Clara's always been direct. Remember that time in college, Clara? That guy, Chad, in our Intro to Philosophy class, he kept trying to dominate every discussion, thought he was the smartest person in the room. You just dismantled his argument, piece by piece, without raising your voice. He just sat there, mouth open." Jill laughed, a genuine, unburdening sound. A flicker of the old satisfaction returned to Clara. She remembered Chad. He had it coming, she said, a small smile playing on her lips. He genuinely believed he was doing everyone a favor by explaining the obvious. I just pointed out the logical inconsistencies. He turned bright red. Ben had drifted over, a fresh beer in his hand. He put an arm around Clara's waist, his grip firm. He was smiling, a pleasant, easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Yeah, he agreed, his voice light, almost too casual. Clara's got a way with words. She doesn't suffer anyone gladly, that's for sure. He paused, his gaze fixed on some point over her shoulder. Remember that barista last week? You practically chewed his head off for messing up the order. He was just trying to do his job. Clara felt a quick prickle of annoyance. Oh, he was rude, she said, waving a dismissive hand. And it wasn't chewed off, Ben. It was a simple correction. He charged me for a double shot and gave me a single. That's a mistake worth correcting. She forced a smile, turning her attention back to Jill. But the casual barb hung in the air, a small, persistent burr under her skin. The wine bottle was half empty. The music had been turned up another notch, the air thick with conversation and the clinking of glasses. Clara found herself in the center of the living room, a natural magnet for attention. Her voice carrying over the din, she felt a certain buzz, a confidence that settled deep in her bones. The earlier prickle from Ben's comment had faded, replaced by the easy camaraderie of their friends. All right, everyone, Clara announced, holding up her glass. Who's ready for a game? Something to liven things up a bit, beyond just rehashing old college stories. Maeve, ever the gracious host, chuckled. What did you have in mind, Clara? Truth or dare? Perhaps. Better, Clara declared, a mischievous glint in her eye. We'll call it roast or toast. Someone volunteers, we flip a coin. Heads, you get roasted. Tails, you get toasted. And everyone gets a turn to say something. A few hesitant murmurs went through the group. Nora wrung her hand slightly. Oh, I don't know, Clara. Roasting sounds a little intense. We're all friends here. Clara waved off the concern with a dismissive hand. Come on, Nora. It's just jokes. A little good-natured teasing. Nothing personal, right? Just a chance to show off our wit. We're all adults. We can handle it. She grinned, looking around at the circle of faces. Who's brave enough to go first? Ben, who had been leaning against the doorframe, quiet for a while, pushed himself off the wood. He moved into the circle, a thoughtful expression on his face. Maybe we should set some ground rules, he suggested, his voice calm, cutting through the rising chatter. Just to make sure nobody gets too personal. We don't want to cross any lines. Clara rolled her eyes, but a smile touched her lips. Oh, look at Mr. Peacekeeper over here, she teased, nudging him lightly with her elbow. Always worried about feelings. Fine, Ben. What are your wise ground rules? No cheap shots, he said, holding her gaze. Nothing about physical appearance. And definitely no bringing up old exes. Keep it to personality traits, habits, general quirks, things that everyone can laugh at. Clara considered it for a moment. Agreed. She conceded. Good rules. Fair enough. Now, who's going to be the first guinea pig? Or should I say, the first subject for public praise or humiliation? She held up a quarter. Ben raised his hand. I'll go first. Clara's eyebrows lifted in surprise. She hadn't expected him to volunteer. A small thrill ran through her. This would be fun. She tossed the coin high, catching it expertly in her palm before slapping it onto the back of her other hand. Heads or tails, Ben? Heads, he called. She slowly lifted her hand. It was heads. All right, Ben, she announced, a triumphant note in her voice. You're getting roasted, honey. And I'm going first. Bring it on. She felt entirely confident. They had always been able to tease each other, their banter sharp but always with an underlying current of affection. Ben took a slow breath, his eyes meeting hers. For a fleeting moment, Clara thought she saw something in his gaze, a flicker of hesitation. Perhaps even a hint of old hurt she couldn't quite place. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a neutral, almost unreadable expression. He began, his voice steady, measured, as if reading from a prepared script. "Clara," he started, a slight smile playing on his lips. "You're one of the smartest people I know. Seriously, your wit is razor-sharp, and you can debate anyone into the ground." A few people murmured agreement, nodding. "But," he continued, and the shift in his tone was subtle, almost imperceptible, "sometimes, I think you're a walking, talking Twitter feed of hot takes and sick burns. It's like you don't have an off switch." The room grew a little quieter. The nervous laughter that followed was thinner than before. "You're always on," Ben went on, his gaze still fixed on her. "Always dissecting, always analyzing, always finding the flaw, the crack, the logical inconsistency in whatever someone says or does, even with us, your friends. Sometimes, it feels like you're constantly looking for the angle, the weak point. Even when we're just trying to relax." Clara felt a distinct twinge, a sudden, unfamiliar heat rising in her face. It was a surprise. She had expected something light, something about her love for true crime podcasts, or her tendency to organize everything into color-coded lists. Not this quiet dissection of her very nature, delivered with such calm precision. The slight offense was there, mingling with a deeper uncertainty. "You're the queen of the verbal evisceration," Ben finished, his voice unwavering. "And it's impressive, truly. But sometimes, Clara, it's just a lot." The words hung in the air. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Sam coughed, clearing his throat. Jill glanced quickly at Nora. The game continued after that, with Maeve stepping up next, and the coin landing on toast, bringing a collective sigh of relief. But as Clara listened to the gentle compliments and light-hearted jokes that followed, her mind kept circling back to Ben's words. No off-switch, always dissecting. Queen of the verbal evisceration. Was it just a joke? Or was there something else, something colder and more pointed, behind his steady gaze? Jill raised her glass towards Clara, her eyes kind. "All right. My turn. And it's a toast for Clara." She smiled warmly. "Clara, you're one of the most loyal people I know. If I ever needed someone to stand up for me, to really go to bat, I'd pick you every time. And your sense of humor, even when it's cutting, always makes me laugh." Clara managed a tight smile, nodding her thanks. The words were a balm, a welcome counterpoint to Ben's earlier remarks, but the sting hadn't entirely vanished. The pleasant buzz from the wine had been replaced by a subtle edginess. The game continued. Sam's coin landed on roast for Tom. Sam, ever the diplomat, delivered a good-natured jab about Tom's legendary inability to pull himself away from his gaming console, even for important events. The laughter was lighter this time, more genuine. The game found its rhythm. But a faint, underlying tension clung to Clara. A thread in the fabric of the evening. From across the room, Ben watched her. His expression was unreadable, a guarded look in his eyes that Clara couldn't decipher. He took another sip of his beer, his gaze flickering away when she met it. After Kyle had been toasted for his unwavering dedication to his family, Clara drifted towards Ben, a half-smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. The challenge was there, beneath the surface. "So, that's what you really think of me, huh?" she asked, keeping her voice low, attempting a playful tone that felt brittle even to her own ears. Ben sighed, a small exhale of air, and shifted his weight. "It was just a game, Clara. You know that. It's roast or toast. You know I love your quick mind. I wouldn't trade it for anything," but it felt like there was something else in those words. "Ben," Clara pressed, her voice a little sharper than she intended. "Not just a game. It felt practiced. Like you'd been thinking about it." He shook his head, a dismissive gesture. "You're overthinking it, Clara. It's just you being you. Always analyzing. That's what I was talking about. Don't read into it." He took another long swallow of his beer, avoiding her gaze. Just then, Maeve clapped her hands, her voice bright. All right. Enough of the intense roasting. Let's lighten the mood. Who's in for a round of Never Have I Ever?" A collective groan mixed with some enthusiasm. The game was a familiar party staple, A safer, more revealing kind of fun. They all grabbed fresh drinks. The rules were simple. 5 fingers up, put one down if you'd done what was called out. The questions started innocently enough. Never have I ever fallen asleep during a movie at the cinema. Tom and Kyle put a finger down, chuckling. Never have I ever eaten an entire pint of ice cream in one sitting. Jill and Nora lowered a finger, giggling. Then Sam, with a sly grin, looked directly at Ben. Never have I ever cheated on a partner. The air in the room seemed to still. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She glanced at Ben. His hand, which had been halfway to his mouth with his beer, paused. His eyes darted around the room, meeting hers for a split second before looking away, fixed on the floor. A beat of silence stretched, longer than it should have been. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, Ben lowered his hand, taking a drink. One finger down, Clara's heart gave a sudden, cold jolt. She felt a tightening in her stomach, a dizzying wave of unease. Her gaze locked onto his, but he avoided it, taking another sip, his face carefully blank. The game moved on, the laughter picking up again. But for Clara, the easy flow of the evening had shattered. Later, as the party began its slow, inevitable winding down, people starting to gather their coats, Clara found herself near the kitchen doorway. Maeve and Jill were talking in low tones, rinsing glasses. "He's been so strange lately," Maeve murmured, almost to herself, as she scrubbed a wine glass. "Ben, I mean, did you notice anything?" Jill nodded, her voice hushed. "Yeah, actually. He's been really vague about this new work project he's apparently taken on. Every time I ask, he just shrugs it off, says it's complicated or still in the early stages. Usually he'd be all excited, sharing details." "Exactly," Maeve said, setting the clean glass on the drying rack with a soft clink. "And I saw him the other day, down on Elm Street, at that little coffee shop, the Daily Grind. You know, the one with the weird art and all the college kids? Ben never goes there. He's a Starbucks-only kind of guy." He looked anxious, like he didn't want to be seen. Clara stood frozen, the words hitting her like small, sharp stones. The image of Ben hesitating before drinking in Never Have I Ever flashed through her mind, colder and clearer now. Anxious. Vague. An unusual coffee shop. The pieces didn't fit the Ben she thought she knew. A hollow feeling began to spread in her chest. The days following Maeve's party were tinged with a persistent, low-grade hum of unease. Ben's roast still smarted, a dull ache beneath her ribs. His hesitation during Never Have I Ever replayed in her mind, a jarring note. And Maeve and Jill's hushed conversation about his strange behavior, his vague work project, the unusual coffee shop. They formed a tight knot in her stomach that refused to loosen. Clara started to watch him. Not overtly, but with a quiet, observant precision she usually reserved for complex project reports. She noticed the way he would suddenly check his phone when she left the room, the quick flick of his eyes to the screen, the way he'd often carry it with him even to get a glass of water. His stories about work were sparser, less detailed. He was often lost in thought, a faraway look in his eyes, not quite present even when they were sitting together on the couch. One Tuesday, while doing laundry, she found a crumpled receipt in the pocket of his favorite jacket. It was from Flora and Thyme, a small, artisanal flower shop in the next town over, a place he'd never visited, preferring the convenience of the grocery store florist. The date on the receipt was from 2 weeks ago, and the purchase was for a bouquet of lilies. Lilies. Clara hadn't received lilies. The paper felt brittle in her hand, a small, undeniable piece of the puzzle. She folded it carefully, placing it back in the pocket. That evening, she tried a direct approach, carefully casual. "So, you've been really busy with this new project, huh?" she asked, stirring her coffee. "You haven't really talked much about it." She watched his face for any flicker. Ben looked up from his newspaper, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Yeah, it's a lot. Just a big client. A lot of moving parts. Nothing you'd find very interesting. Honestly, mostly just spreadsheets and meetings." His tone was dismissive, almost impatient. He returned his gaze to the newsprint. "Why do you ask?" You keep asking about it. Just curious, Clara replied, forcing a lightness she didn't feel. His defensiveness was like a spark, igniting a colder, harder suspicion within her. A few nights later, Ben went to take a shower. The sound of the water drumming against the tiles filled the quiet house. Clara was sitting on the edge of the bed, ostensibly reading, but her eyes kept drifting to his phone, which he'd left charging on his nightstand. A gut feeling, cold and insistent, pulsed through her. It wasn't curiosity. It was a desperate need to know. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. The screen was dark. She pressed the side button. A notification flashed briefly at the top. A small, unfamiliar icon with a number beside it. Not their usual messaging app. Not text. Her heart began to pound, a heavy drum in her chest. She unlocked the phone with his thumbprint, which he had let her set up years ago for convenience. Her finger hovered over the unfamiliar icon. Taking a deep breath, she tapped it. The app opened to a stream of messages. Her eyes scanned the screen. The words leaping out at her. Can't wait to see you again. Friday felt like forever ago. Me neither. You make these boring workdays tolerable. Lunch tomorrow? Always. Your laugh is my favorite sound. Mine too. So glad I found you, Ben. The words were intimate, loving, sickeningly sweet. They described secret meetings, shared laughs, declarations of affection. Clara felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. She scrolled back, her fingers clumsy, tracing the timeline of their clandestine conversations. Weeks. Months. It had been going on for months. Then, she saw a name pop up frequently, in the earlier messages, mentioned in contexts of new hire and training. Sarah. Sarah Peterson. The new junior marketing associate Ben had mentioned a few times, offhandedly. Good head on her shoulders, he'd said. The shower water stopped. Clara heard the bathroom door creak open. Ben's whistling started, a casual, happy tune. He was oblivious. Completely, utterly oblivious. Clara's world did not just crack, it shattered into a million tiny, jagged pieces. A cold, dead weight settled in her stomach, heavy and unmoving. She felt a primal scream rising in her throat, but no sound escaped. She stumbled off the bed, clutching Ben's phone in her hand, the screen still glowing with their messages. She slammed the bathroom door shut behind her, the lock clicking with a sharp finality. Leaning against the cold tile, she slid down to the floor. The tears came, silent and hot, streaming down her face, blurring the familiar patterns of the tile. The betrayal was a raw, gaping wound. The phone, still warm from his hand, felt like a burning brand. Their quiet Midwestern home, once a sanctuary, now echoed with 1,000 unspoken lies. Clara pushed open the bathroom door, her movements precise, almost stiff. Her face felt cold, stretched tight, but she focused on keeping it composed. Ben was already in the living room, flipping through channels, a contented sigh escaping him. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Everything all right?" he asked, his brow furrowing slightly. "You were in there a while. You're a little pale." Clara walked to the center of the room, the phone still clutched in her right hand, its screen dark. Her voice, when it came, was eerily calm, detached. "Who is Sarah, Ben?" The remote slipped from Ben's fingers, clattering softly onto the carpet. His body stiffened, his eyes widening. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly gray pallor. "Sarah? What? Sarah who?" he stammered, the words tripping over each other. A flimsy denial already crumbling. Clara took a step forward, shoving the phone into his trembling hands. The screen lit up with the messaging app, the intimate exchanges between him and Sarah displayed in stark, damning blue and white. "Don't lie to me," she stated, her voice cracking, the carefully constructed composure giving way to a raw, guttural sound. "Not anymore." Ben's gaze fell to the screen, then back to her. His shoulders slumped, and he collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. A low, choked sound escaped him, muffled against his palms. "Clara," he whispered, the name broken, full of defeat. "God, Clara. I'm so sorry. He lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot, fixed on some point beyond her. He started talking, his voice hoarse, recounting a story that Clara already knew in fragments. An innocent connection at work, a shared laugh over a coffee machine, lunch breaks that stretched longer than they should have, the slow, insidious slide into something more, the way he felt understood, somehow, by her. In a way he hadn't realized he was missing. The guilt, he mumbled, had been eating at him, a constant stone in his gut, a whirlwind of emotions twisted inside Clara, a searing anger, a profound hurt that felt physical, and a nauseating wave that threatened to make her vomit. Details, she demanded, her voice flat, devoid of warmth. I want details, Ben. All of them. When? How many times? Where did you meet? Each answer he offered, hesitant and wretched, felt like another stab to her heart, twisting the knife a little deeper. The flower receipt, the coffee shop, the vague work project. It all clicked into place. A monstrous mosaic of deceit. Ben pushed himself off the couch, moving to kneel before her, his hands reaching for hers. Please, Clara. It was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. I was lost. I swear to you. It meant nothing. Not like you. Please, just give me another chance. I can fix this. We can fix this. His eyes pleaded with her, brimming with tears. Clara pulled her hands away, stepping back. The sight of his raw desperation did not move her, only hardened something inside her. A mistake? She echoed, her voice laced with bitterness. Is that what you called it? While you were roasting me at Maeve's party, telling everyone I have no off switch? That I'm constantly dissecting people? Was that your way of telling me you were suffocated, Ben? Was that your pathetic confession? Cloaked in a joke? He flinched, his shoulders hunching. I was struggling, Clara. I know. It was a terrible thing to say. But I felt suffocated by your intensity. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Like everything I did or said was under a microscope. I still love you, Clara. I truly do. But I was just so lost, so confused. Clara stared at him, incredulous. Suffocated? Her voice rose. No longer calm, no longer even. You felt suffocated? And your solution, Ben, your adult, responsible solution, was to find someone else? To lie to me, for months? Why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you say anything? Why did you choose betrayal? The argument escalated, their voices rising, sharp and unforgiving. The comfortable silence that had once filled their home was now shattered by bitter accusations, resounding off the walls. The air grew thick with their words, each one a weapon. This was not the man she had loved, the man who had comforted her, who had made her laugh. This was a stranger. I don't know you anymore, Clara finally declared, the words cold and clear. The man I thought I knew, the man I loved. He's gone. The house, usually filled with the gentle sounds of their shared life, was now an echo chamber of the argument. A thick, suffocating silence pressed down on Clara after Ben's admission, each breath she took feeling like an effort. Her demand for him to leave had been calm, unyielding. I need you out, she had stated, her voice devoid of inflection. Just for a while. I can't think with you here. Ben had stood there, shoulders slumped, his face a mask of shame and despair. He hadn't argued. He simply nodded, a slow, defeated gesture. He moved through the house with a somber quietness, collecting a small bag of essentials. A few shirts, toiletries. His laptop. The familiar click of the front door closing behind him was not a relief, but a hollow, resonating sound in the sudden emptiness. Clara walked to the kitchen, her steps measured, and picked up her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed Maeve's number. He cheated on me, she said, without preamble, her voice surprisingly steady, though she could feel a tremor in her throat. The words hung in the air, heavy and blunt. Maeve's gasp was sharp, followed by a string of furious exclamations. That son of a bitch! I knew something was off. Oh, Clara, I am so sorry. What are you going to do? I'll kill him. Her unwavering support was a small anchor in the storm. The news, as these things always do in a tight-knit group, filtered through their friends. It wasn't spoken directly at first, but through hushed phone calls and awkward silences. Sam and Jill were the first to visit, bringing a casserole and a bottle of wine. Sam sat quietly, his hand on Clara's arm, while Jill spoke, her voice laced with disappointment. "I can't believe Ben," she said, shaking her head. "He always seemed solid. This isn't like him." Clara nodded, taking some small comfort in their presence. Tom and Nora, however, maintained a careful distance. A short, stilted text from Nora wishing her well, but no offer to meet. Clara understood. Their shared social circles were fractured, and some preferred to remain out of the blast radius. Ben tried to contact her. His phone vibrated with texts. "Please talk to me. I'm so sorry. I miss you." Later, voicemails appeared in her inbox, his voice raw with regret. Clara didn't listen to them. She deleted them, one after another. The small, mechanical act, a way of asserting some control, of creating a necessary distance. The immediate, searing pain of betrayal slowly began to morph, shifting into something colder, harder. A simmering anger took root, replacing the initial heartbreak. Maeve, in her righteous fury, often called with updates, mostly inadvertent. "I saw him at the grocery store, Clara, looking like a ghost," she'd say, then add, "And you know what? He had those weird artisanal olives that Sarah always buys, the expensive ones." Or, "Jill saw Sarah at that coffee shop on Elm, the one you mentioned. She was laughing, like she didn't have a care in the world." Each piece of information, however small, chipped away at Clara's emotional insulation, deepening her sense of humiliation. It wasn't just Ben's betrayal, it was the public nature of it. The way Sarah was still living her life, seemingly unaffected. Clara spent hours in silence, staring out the window at the familiar Midwestern landscape, the quiet streets, the orderly rows of houses. Her thoughts revolved, cold and methodical. Simple separation felt insufficient. The idea of just letting Ben walk away, of Sarah continuing her new job without consequence, grated against a newfound hardness within her. A seed of retaliation, small but insistent, began to sprout. She started, subtly, to gather information. She remembered Sarah's last name from Ben's phone. A quick search brought up her LinkedIn profile. Her professional history. She looked at Ben's company website. The organizational chart. She remembered a casual conversation about a large upcoming client presentation Ben was spearheading, a crucial project for his department. The desire for justice, or perhaps a more primal form of revenge, began to eclipse the raw ache in her chest. Clara's anger had ceased to be a volatile, consuming fire. Instead, it had hardened into something cold, sharp, and resolute. She was not going to be the only one to suffer. The quiet nights in her home, now empty of Ben's presence, were filled with a methodical planning, a chilling clarity. Her first move was practical. She contacted a lawyer recommended by a colleague, a firm specializing in family law. The conversations were factual, devoid of emotion, focusing on the division of assets, the intricacies of divorce proceedings. She listened, absorbed, and made notes. This was a business transaction now, a calculated disentanglement. Next, she engineered an accidental encounter with Sarah. She knew the routes Sarah took to work, the coffee shop she frequented before heading to the office. One Tuesday morning, Clara found herself at the same counter, ordering a coffee, just as Sarah walked in. Sarah was younger than Clara had expected. Dressed in a sleek, confident manner, she carried herself with an air of ambition, a quick, almost predatory intelligence in her eyes. Observing her, Clara saw not a rival in love, but a climber, someone who saw opportunities in every interaction. Ben, Clara realized with a cold clarity, had likely been just another rung on Sarah's ladder. Clara began to subtly seed information. At a casual lunch with an old friend from work, a woman known for her extensive network and inability to keep a secret, Clara mused aloud about Ben. "Ben's been so distracted lately," she'd say, stirring her soup. "I don't know what's gotten into him. He's usually so focused, but he seems off. Really off. Like something heavy is on his mind. Or maybe it's a new interest." She made sure the tone was one of vague concern, leaving just enough unsaid for the imagination to fill the gaps. Soon, Clara started to hear whispers filter back. Ben's colleagues noted his dip in productivity, his frequent absences from his desk, the haunted look in his eyes. Rumors of his distractedness and preoccupation began to circulate, carefully amplified by Clara's subtle interventions. He was struggling. She knew, isolated, regretting his choices, but too proud to fully admit his failings to anyone, especially not to their mutual friends. His professional reputation, carefully built over years, was starting to fray at the edges. Clara's plan solidified, focusing on a precise public unveiling. The upcoming annual company picnic provided the perfect opportunity. It was a large, informal gathering where social and professional lines blurred, and gossip spread like wildfire. She didn't want a dramatic confrontation. She wanted a quiet, undeniable implosion. She picked her target carefully: Brenda, a mid-level manager in accounting. Brenda was a known busybody, deeply connected to various departments, and possessed a theatrical flair for storytelling. Clara arranged to run into Brenda near the dessert table at the picnic. "Brenda," Clara began, her voice lowered, conveying a sense of urgent, confidential distress. "Can I ask you something? You're so connected at the office. You know everything. Has Ben seemed all right to you lately? I'm just so worried." She then paused, leaning in conspiratorially. I overheard something. Something about him and Sarah Peterson. And it was intimate. Too intimate for colleagues. I can't believe it. But I saw them together. At that coffee shop on Elm. He said he was at a meeting. Oh God. Brenda. What do I do? Clara let her voice trail off, her eyes wide with feigned distress. Clutching Brenda's arm, as if for support, Brenda's eyes, already wide, gleamed with the thrill of fresh, high-stakes gossip. "Sarah Peterson? You're kidding me," she whispered back, leaning in even closer. "But Ben's with you." Clara shook her head sadly. "It seems he's not. I just found out." She allowed a single tear to well in her eye, before quickly wiping it away. "I'm just so hurt. I don't know who to trust." The information, delivered with such calculated innocence, spread like wildfire. By the end of the picnic, the whispers about Ben and Sarah were pervasive. The affair was no longer a secret. It was office knowledge, reaching the ears of senior management who valued discretion and professionalism above all else. Sarah's reputation, as the ambitious new hire who crossed ethical lines, took an immediate hit. Ben's professional standing, once solid, now appeared deeply compromised. He was perceived as unreliable, someone whose personal indiscretions could impact his work. Clara watched from a distance, nursing a non-alcoholic punch, a grim satisfaction settling in her chest. She had done it. She had ensured that they wouldn't emerge unscathed. Yet, beneath the satisfaction, a hollow ache remained. She had irrevocably damaged their world, yes, but in doing so, she had also fractured a piece of herself. The fallout from the company picnic was swift and precise. Formal inquiries were initiated at Ben's company. A cold, corporate process of interviews and reports. His colleagues, once cordial, now averted their gaze, their conversations hushed when he approached. His career prospects, once promising, visibly dimmed, clouded by the shadow of indiscretion and a clear lack of judgment. He was removed from the leadership of the crucial client presentation, replaced by someone less compromised. Sarah, too, faced the consequences. Disciplinary action was taken, and the quiet professionalism she had cultivated was shattered. Colleagues who had once offered friendly advice now kept a careful distance. Her ambitious climb had stumbled, leaving her isolated in the professional landscape she had hoped to conquer. Ben's easygoing demeanor, his peacekeeper facade, crumbled completely. What remained was a man burdened by guilt, his shoulders hunched, his eyes perpetually shadowed. The characteristic flicker of humor was gone, replaced by a deep, pervasive shame. He looked older, his face etched with the consequences of his choices. He tried one last time to salvage their relationship, catching Clara on the porch one evening as she watered the wilting petunias. His voice was raw, his words desperate. "Clara, please, don't go through with the divorce. We can fix this. I know I messed up, I know. But I still love you." Sarah meant nothing. "Please," he reached for her, his hand trembling. Clara recoiled, stepping back from his touch. She looked at him, not with anger, but with a chilling clarity. The result of weeks of silent deliberation. "You wanted honesty, Ben?" she said, her voice low and steady, devoid of the emotion that clawed at her insides. "Here it is. This is the price. You broke something that can't be put back together. You chose to betray me. And you chose to disrespect our life. I didn't ask for any of this. But I am not going to be the only one who pays for it." His face contorted in a silent plea, but Clara continued, her words precise, each one a calculated jab. "You thought I was suffocating you. You thought I was too intense? Well, I hope you found some breathing room in your clandestine meetings and your pretty messages. You thought I was too sharp? Now you know exactly how sharp I can be. This isn't just about what you did, Ben. It's about how you did it, and how you tried to hide it, and how you thought you could just walk away from it all without consequence." Their final conversation was brutal, marked by unresolvable hurt, recrimination, and the stark reality of what had been lost. There were no tears from Clara, only a quiet, resolute finality. Ben's pleas withered in the face of her unwavering resolve. The divorce proceedings moved forward, a stark, unfeeling process of legal documents and financial disclosures. Their shared life, meticulously built over 8 years, was now being formally divided, item by item. The house, the savings, the furniture, everything was reduced to figures on a spreadsheet. Their once unified friend group was irrevocably split. Maeve, Sam, and Jill stood firmly by Clara. Tom and Nora, however, drifted further away, unable to navigate the chasm that had opened. Ben was largely left to face the condemnation and pity alone. Unable to face the judgment, the whispering, and the wreckage of his Midwestern life, Ben eventually left town. He found a new job in a city a few states away, a fresh start in a place where no one knew his past. Clara heard about it through Maeve, a casual mention in a phone call. It was a clean break, a silent retreat. Clara, in turn, put the house up for sale. The for sale sign in the front yard felt like a physical tearing away, severing the last tangible ties to their shared past. She walked through the empty rooms, remembering dinner parties, quiet evenings, whispered dreams. She had won, in a way. She had extracted her pound of flesh. But as she stood in the silence, she felt no triumph. Only an immense, bone-deep exhaustion. The moral consequences of her actions, the cold, hard decisions she had made, weighed heavily on her. The bitter taste of what she had lost, irrevocably, lingered. Clara eventually settled into a smaller, functional apartment on the outskirts of town. It lacked the sprawling yard and the familiar scent of old wood that had defined her previous home. But it was hers alone, a clean slate. She arranged her belongings with a deliberate, almost minimalist precision, each item placed to serve a purpose. There was a quiet hum to this new life, a solitude she was learning to navigate. She threw herself into her career with a renewed, almost desperate focus. Work provided structure, a tangible measure of progress, a distraction from the quiet ache that still resided beneath the surface. She met deadlines, managed projects, and excelled in her roles. But the innate zest, the spark of passionate engagement she once had, felt subdued, muted. It was an effective mechanism, but not a fulfilling one. Maeve and Jill remained her steadfast companions. They were the anchors in her shifting world, offering cups of coffee, shared silences, and the occasional, much-needed burst of laughter. They helped her sort through the emotional landscape, validating her anger and her hurt, but also listening when Clara started to voice her own difficult reflections. She learned, through Maeve's occasional updates, that Ben had moved to a smaller city in Minnesota. He was attempting a fresh start, working a new job, but the burden of his past, Maeve reported, was heavy on him. He hadn't entirely escaped the consequences of his actions, not emotionally. The Midwestern sense of community, Clara knew, meant that some judgments traveled further than miles. One afternoon, while picking up groceries, Clara saw Sarah. She was at the far end of an aisle, her back to Clara. When she turned, her face was visible, drawn and tired. The confident ambition Clara had observed at the coffee shop, now a ghost of its former self. There was a fragile quality to her, a hint of vulnerability that Clara hadn't expected. Sarah loaded a few basic items into her basket, oblivious to Clara's presence, and then moved on. Clara felt a strange mix of vindication and an unsettling hollowness. The quiet, solitary hours in her new apartment offered ample time for reflection. The cycle of betrayal and revenge, she realized, had left its mark on everyone. It wasn't a clean victory. The cost was diffuse, affecting them all in different, unexpected ways. She began to re-examine Ben's roast at the party, not as an insult, but as a fractured window into his own struggles. His words, no off switch, always dissecting, had stung precisely because there was a kernel of truth in them. Her own sharp edges, her relentless analytical mind, had perhaps contributed to the erosion of intimacy, to his feeling of suffocation. Not an excuse for his actions. No, never that, but a piece of the complicated human mess they had become. Clara acknowledged her own flaws, her own contributions to the dynamic that had led to their undoing. It was a painful, necessary, self-reckoning. She understood that she was not blameless in the broader, more complex narrative of their relationship's decline, even if Ben carried the full weight of the betrayal. This realization, raw and unflinching, was a step towards healing. She started therapy, a quiet, weekly conversation with a kind woman who listened and offered gentle guidance. It was a slow process of sifting through the wreckage, learning to trust again, starting with trusting herself. The Midwestern landscape outside her window, with its predictable seasons and resilient fields, once represented a stable, unchanging world. Now, it mirrored her own quiet resilience, the capacity to endure and adapt. She found moments of unexpected peace, a calm settling in her heart that had nothing to do with triumph and everything to do with acceptance. It was a gradual understanding. Some things, once broken so completely, could never be fully mended, but new paths could still be forged. Clara walked a new, solitary path now. It was not the path she had envisioned, but it was hers. Her step was measured, her gaze thoughtful, carrying the quiet resolve of the Midwest in her bones. She was not triumphant, but she was moving forward. Word count. Clara sat on her small balcony, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the neighborhood. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant lawnmowers. She thought of Ben, of Sarah, of the life that had been, and the one that now was. The jagged edges of betrayal had softened, but the scars remained, a permanent part of her landscape. She had sought justice, found a form of it, and in doing so, had carved out a new space for herself. There was no grand triumph, no sudden surge of happiness, only the quiet understanding that life, even when irrevocably changed, continued. She would carry the lessons, the pain, and the hard-won clarity. She would build again, one careful step at a time. Under the vast, indifferent, Midwestern sky, Clara found her rhythm in the smaller apartment, the absence of Ben a constant, quiet hum. She pushed hard at work, finding a brittle satisfaction in measurable achievements. But the deep, internal spark felt dampened. Maeve and Jill remained steady, their loyalty a solid ground in the shifting landscape of her life. Ben, she heard, had found new ground in Minnesota, carrying his own quiet burdens, while Sarah's ambition had indeed dimmed, a ghost of what it was. The sting of betrayal had faded, replaced by a colder clarity. She saw the full arc now. The insult, the meticulous revenge, the quiet wreckage left behind. She recognized the truth in Ben's old roast. Her own sharp edges, her relentless analysis, had carved out space for distance. It wasn't an excuse for his choices, but it was part of the tangled mess. Therapy offered a slow, unraveling, a cautious path to rebuilding trust, starting with herself. The flat, wide Midwestern sky, once a frame for her stable life, now seemed to whisper of resilience. She found moments of peace, understanding that while some things shattered beyond repair, new foundations could still be laid. She walked forward, not with triumph, but with the quiet, thoughtful resolve of someone who had learned the hard cost of every choice.